Hey students, I hope all is well. I'm here with another tutorials request video. This one is for project 6, front end nano degree. And it looks like the request is where to start and an overall walkthrough. And it looks like there's just 3 requests for project 6. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get started. In this particular video, I'm going to give a broad overview of what to do, how to get started. I'm going to create another video that goes into depth of how I went about creating the project, how I separate components, how I organize my code. But in this short video, I'm just going to cover the main topics and follow along the rubric for that project. So in Udacity's classroom, where you download the starter code right here, you can see they have the link for cloning the repository. You could start from scratch, but that was going to take a lot of time. So I just started from their starting point, already cloned it right here on my desktop. I already have it running. And I have it loaded up here in my text editor. So what I wanted to pretty much cover is basically compare what they've given us to how it should be, right? Now, one of the main important things when working on your project is that your code is readable, right? You're following the standard practices such as indentation, naming conventions, things of that nature, and also organizing your files and folders so things are easy to find. It's easy to navigate your file structure. So looking at what Udacity gives us, we use create React app. We give you a public folder, a source folder, and some information files. You're going to be spending most of your time in the source folder. And if you look at app.js, we can see that everything is put into this one file. And we even have some, I won't call it an error, it still loads, but it's JSX, so you're not supposed to have like a single quotation. It's just hard to read at this point. So one point or one thing you can do to start is organize your files, right? Now, how can you organize what we have here? Well, we see things that are repetitive, right? We see list items, and we see bookshelves, bookshelves. In React, the main idea of React is components. So instead of jumbling all of this code into one file, we can create a component for each of the things that are repetitive, like the shelves. And that's what I did in my code. So in my source folder, I created a components folder, and inside components folder, I created a pages folder that has a main page and a search page component. And then inside of components folder, I created a book component, and then I created a shelf component, right? Now in the index.js, I installed React Router DOM and imported the browser router, wrapped it around the app root, right? So we can use the routing inside of the app. Now inside of app.js, I just have a simple div, right? So as opposed to all of this code here that was given to us inside of app.js, we have just these 2 simple routes, right? Now if I wanted to create another route, let's say like a book route, then I can simply come to pages, create like a book page component, mount it here. And the reason why I do that is because of readability. This code right here is simplistic, it's concise. I can see exactly what's going on. For this path, I'm mounting this page component, which is this right here, right? Same thing for the search page. At the search path, I'm going to mount this search component. So that way I can easily find the component that I need to edit or deal with. So once I created all the components that I need, I just tie them together, right? So on the main page, instead of having all of those shelves, I just created a shelf component, right? Which is this right here. And then I'm passing the name of that shelf and all of the books that it's responsible for rendering. And these books are coming from the books API. So when the component mounts, it's going to call this method component did mount. I'm going to get the books back from the response and set it to the state, which will cause a re-render. And I'm going to pass all of the books to each respective shelf. Also, by the way, I added a constructor method, so I can add a empty array as starting. So if we call filter on books, it won't cause an error, right? Now for each shelf, instead of hard coding values, its name will come from the props, and the books that it will render will come from the main page books that was passed to it. Now for each books in the prop, it's going to render a book component. It's going to pass down this update book method to shelf. Shelf is going to pass that method to each book. And inside of the book, we have that one list item. And inside of the list item, same thing as shelf, we're replacing all of the hard-coded values with the book prop that we passed, right? We're going to pass it this book prop right here. Now once it gets that, it's going to set all of the values. We're going to set the select value to this.prop.books.shelf or none. If this is falsy, then we're going to set it to none. We're going to set the onChange method, and whenever we change the value, we're going to call that update book method that we got from props that was passed down from each parent component, right? Once this gets called, it's going to come back to main page. It's going to call books API.update. We're going to change the shelf of that book and then set the state again, except this time we're going to filter out the state by all the books that's not this one and then re-add it back. The only difference is the shelf is different, right? So we have this method here. I also added it to the search page component, so we can also change the shelves on the search page. And here on the search page, we have that input at the top. All we're doing here is just, well, what I did was call this.update query on change. This.update query will set the query state on this component, and when it's done, it's going to call this.submit search. If it's empty, we'll clear out the results list. If it's not empty, then we're going to search that query. If we get back an error, we're just going to clear the results list. This is just for error handling. Now, if we do get some results, I'm going to loop through each of them, and then I'm going to filter out our books, right? And if we find a book with the same ID as this one from the result, then we're going to update that shelf, right? And then once we do this filter here, we're just going to set state the results to the component state, and it's going to cause a re-render, and we're going to show all the results. and we're still going to pass that update book prop and the books and keys. So essentially the same thing. This book is being rendered by the search page and main page, doing error handling by checking the API result for an error. Inside the book component, we're checking if there is an image links prop, then get the thumbnail property inside of it, or just use an empty string if this fails. Same thing here for author. If there's no authors, then just use this string, no author, dot, 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 right? So basically with all of this code here, I just created my 4 components, linked them together. As far as the main page, instead of using the anchor tag, we just use React Router's link component, which will link to the search page. Same thing on the search page, we have a link component that pushes it back to the root right here. Now with all of this code here, this is what the app looks like. So here I'm on the main page, and we can see that whenever we come to this path, which is just /, which is the root, it renders the main page component, which has all the shelves in the books, right? If I were to, let's say, render another one, let's save it, in theory, it should still work, right? You have the same thing here. Let's say I move this to want to read, is there, right? So that's just demonstrating how components work. Let's put it back. Now when we come to the search page, we're going to mount the search page component, right? Or I'm sorry, when we come to the search route, we're going to mount the search page component, which has this markup. You can see that it works. These two link to each other. If I were to, let's say, type in just one letter, we get results back. Now I know that I have a book called A History of Horror on my want to read shelf. So if I search for it, we see it here, and its value is already set to want to read, letting us know that it's on one of our shelves. Now if I come to any other book, this one is red, this one is none, 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 and so forth, right? So let's say I put in some characters that doesn't match any book, like this. We don't get an error because we check for that in our if statement. If response.error, we're not going to do anything else except clear out the results state, right? Same thing when we delete it. If there's no state query, then we're just going to clear out the results list. Now, whenever we change the path, it's going to pretty much call component didn't mount again and calls a re-render. So by doing that, we can see changes between pages. So let's say I change fitness from want to read to none. I refresh it. It works because we're updating the book on the back end before we change it on the front end, because that's where the information lives, right? So that's working. We have it working on both pages too. So taking a look at the rubric, is the application easy to install? I assume so. Does the application include a README? It does. For you students, you will have to clear out the given README and pretty much customize it and personalize it, demonstrating your understanding, how to acquire the project and run it locally. Main page, does the main page show 3 shelves? It does. currently reading, want to read, read. Does the main page allow users to move books between shelves? It does. I can move from read to want to read, move this to currently reading. We can move shelves around. Does the information persist between page refreshes? And it does, because we're using the Books API, right? So we update on the back end before we update it on the front end, right? Now, search page. Does the search page have a search input that lets users search for books? Search page has a search input, which is here at the top. The search page behaves correctly as the user types into the search field. Books that match the query are displayed on the page. Search results are not shown when all the text is deleted, right? So let's say I search Y, no books, J, you get some books. If I were to delete that, you get nothing, right? Now, invalid queries are handled and prior search results are not shown. Don't worry about the prior search results are not shown. That's a bit extraneous. As far as invalid queries are handled, that's just simply checking error handling by checking the response if there's response.error. So we have that. The search works correctly when a book does not have a thumbnail or an author, right? So basically, in our book component, we're checking if this property exists that has the thumbnail. And if it doesn't, we're just going to use an empty string. The user is able to search for multiple words such as artificial intelligence. So let's go ahead and try that out by copying it. And let's go to the search input. Let's paste it in. We get results, no errors. Right? Let's try poetry. No errors. Delete it. No errors. And no errors. So far, so good, right? Now, do search results allow users to categorize a book? It does, because we are pretty much containing that logic within this book component, which has the select and the onChange method. So that works. Do selections made on the search page show up on the main page? So let's say I search for horror, which is this. It's currently on red. If I switch it to currently reading and come back to the main page, we can see here in currently reading. Now, routing, does the main page link to the search page? Does the search page link back to the main page? Both of those are yes. We're using React's link component to go to the search and go back to the main page. Now, code functionality, does the project code handle state management properly, right? So component state is passed down from parent to child. The state variable is not modified directly. Set state function is used correctly, right? Books have the same state on both pages and main application page. If your book is on a bookshelf, that is reflected in both locations, right? So to all of that, yes, we're not modifying the state directly. This component is simply using the props given, same as the shelf, just using the props given. The only two components that are using state is my search page and my main page component, and that's only to hold the books list and results in query, right? We're only updating it via the set state method of the React component. Same thing on the main page. So the code quality is good. Does it run without errors? Yes, it does, right? So just to give a quick recap, how to start or where to start for this particular project, I would say start on organizing your files and creating the components you need. And then a great idea of identifying what needs to be made as far as components. Just identify how to make things simple, readable, and what you see is being repeated often. Chances are, if it's being repeated often, then you can make a component out of it. For example, this list items being um, used a lot in the given app.js. You can make a component out of this, turn it to a book. Same thing with the shelves. We have current reading, want to read, read. You can make that into a component. You can make this entire um, you can make an entire component a page and mount it to a specific route, like how I did here. It makes it readable. Now, once you organize your code, you make all the components you're going to use. You just tie them together as far as routing by using the React Router's link component, right? Now, once you have your components created and you tie in like navigation, then you can use the Books API to use the server-side information. So let's say on the main page, I pulled in the um, books from the back end, right, using the get all, and then we just pass that information to the shelves. The shelves will pass it to the books, and then just create a method that will update the books on the back end. This is just the way I did it because it seems simple and concise, but there are multiple ways of updating the book. I always recommend updating it on the back end first, then update it in the response, right? So it can persist between page refreshes. And as far as the search page, just make sure that you add an on change so you can see results as you type. Make sure you do error handling. So let's say there's an empty query. If there's nothing, then you wouldn't really submit an empty search to the API. Whenever you get a response, just make sure you check the errors, right? Then once you do get, let's say, queries back, what I did on my search page was I loaded my books. So by the time I search for them, I can compare them and see if they're already on the shelf, right? And then set the state to the response. And then just render them in the same spot that you would on the shelf, right? So with all of that, that should be it for this project. This is just the, I said short, but it's about over 20 minutes. Again, I'm making another video that goes deeper into how I actually created this entire project from scratch. You can watch that. I'll add the link in the description. And with that being said, I'm going to end this video, add the link to the YouTube video here, and mark it as done. I hope this video helps as far as where to start. If you have any questions, just add a comment to the comment section below, and I hope you have a great day.